When you're database programming with Java and you need to use a database, you'll first need to install the connector/J, which is a MySQL component based on the JDBC standard from Oracle. In the description of this video, I provide a link of where you can find and install connector/J from MySQL. Once you have that connector/J package imported into your Java program, first thing you need to do is call a few import statements at the top of your Java program. So we have import java.sql.Connection, import java.sql.DriverManager, and import java.sql.SQL exception. And then we have our Java class called movie, and within that class we have our main method. And the first thing we do in the main method is we try to create a connection to a movie database. So we have a try catch block, and in the try block we are setting movies connection to DriverManager.getConnection, and we're passing in our database credentials, which are our username, password, database hostname, and the name of the database we want to connect to. And if that connection is established fine, we'll be able to add our own Java code for doing any kind of select statements that we want, like inserts, deletes, and updates. And then eventually we'll call movie connections.close to close the database connection. But if there's any kind of issues connecting to the database, it will go to the catch block and it will print out to the screen, cannot connect to the database, and it will get the message from the SQL exception object and let you know why it wasn't able to connect. If you are connected to your database, the next thing you might want to do is execute some queries. So in Java, the statement interface is used for executing SQL queries. And in order to use it, you need to add import java.sql.Statement up at the top of your Java program. And then let's take a look at the example of executing a query in your Java program. First thing we're doing is creating a movie statement object, which is associated to the database connection. And statement is an interface that's used for executing SQL queries. So to use statement, we create a statement object called movie statement in this example, and we're assigning that to the database connection.createStatement, which returns a statement object. And once that's done, we will create our SQL query called movie create, where we're creating a table called movie with an ID, name, and rating. And then to execute that query, to create the table, we'll say movie statement, which is our statement object, .execute, which executes any SQL statements and can be even used for create tables like in this example. After it's executed, it returns a Boolean value of true if the ResultSet object is generated. Then we create another string query called movie insert, where we're inserting the movie Scarface into the movie table. And we're passing in values ID, name, and rating of 100, Scarface, and rated R. And then we're calling the movie statement.executeUpdate method, which executes queries that update data. So if you're doing any kind of insert, delete, or update, use executeUpdate rather than just execute. And it returns the number of matched query rows. There's also an executeQuery method, which compiles the select query into low-level database operations and then executes the query. And to use that, you pass the string query as the parameter, and it returns a ResultSet object which contains the results of the query. And another method that may be useful is the getResultSet, which accesses the result sets generated by the execute method. And don't forget to call the close method on your statement object, which closes and releases the statement object. And you call this method before you close any database connection. In your Java program, if you want to get the results of a database query, you can use the ResultSet interface, which fetches query results. Let's take a look at this example. So first thing we're doing is creating a statement object called movie statement, which is getting from the database connection. And then we create a string query, which is selecting name and price from the Amazon movie table where rating is R and the year is greater than or equal to 2000. Then we're creating a ResultSet object called ResultSet, which is being assigned to movie statement.executeQuery and then passing in the movie query that we just created earlier. And the executeQuery method returns a ResultSet object with the query results. Each ResultSet object maintains a pointer to the current row of the query result, and the first row is the initial row. And by using the next method, which we see that we're doing in this while loop right here, that moves it to the next row and also returns true if the current row advances, or false if you're at the last row of the query result, and then breaks out of that while loop. And there's ResultSet methods that can access and fetch values from the result set. So looking at this while loop, we're calling system.out.println, and we're printing out the word movie, followed by ResultSet.getString and passing name to it. So this getString method takes a column name parameter and returns the string value of the column. And then we're printing out the word cost, followed by a $sign, and then ResultSet.getDoublePrice, which the getDouble method takes a column name parameter and returns the double value of the column. And we could have probably also used getString there, so it would have returned the string value of it also, but it'll still work either way. In your Java program, if you are doing any kind of updates to a database table like an insert, it's a good idea to use query parameters. A prepared statement is an interface that extends the statement interface and adds support for SQL query parameters, which provide you with placeholders that you can use rather than having hard-coded data inside your SQL queries. And that prevents SQL injection attacks, where a hacker can try to change the values of the SQL statements. So a SQL injection is a code injection technique that's used to attack data-driven applications, and malicious SQL statements can be inserted into an entry field for execution in your program, and you don't want any of that. So to avoid that, use a query parameter, which basically replaces your data with question mark characters, and then later on the actual values get passed to your SQL statements when you're about to execute them. So let's take a look at this example and see how it's done. At the top of this program, we're creating a scanner object to read keyboard input from the user, and we're prompting the user to enter the movie ID, movie name, and movie rating, and we're grabbing all that data and storing them as variables, num, name, and rating. Then we create a movie insert string, which is an insert statement for our database. But notice that rather than having actual values in the parentheses after the word values in this insert into movie statement, we have question mark placeholders instead. And then we create a prepared statement object, which it gets from the database connection. The next few statements, we're calling the setInt method to pass the variable num as the first query parameter, and then setString method to set the variable name to the second query parameter, and then the third line of code, setString, where we're passing the rating to the third query parameter. And then finally, our movie prepared statement.executeUpdate will execute the query, insert the data into the database, and then when we're done using the database, we can close our movie prepared statement object.